Welcome to A Turn for the Better. This issue, we're going to go back to a project I did back in probably the late 60s. I made a candle stand for my house and I thought it worked out quite nice. I lost it through a divorce. My daughter gained it back a few years ago and her son laid claim to it. All's well and good, except her other son now wants one. And I've been putting it off and seeing how this issue is about tables. This is what's happening. This is going to be my worksheet, and I'm really not proud of the quality of it, but I did take the old table, just measured it up quick, and as you can see, this has been laying on my workbench for some time. It has a few doodles of everything on it, but I think I still have enough dimensions and figures to take and make my piece. When I made my first table, I didn't have a lathe large enough to turn the top, so I cut it and hand worked the top. Since then, I have lathes that are large enough to turn this, plus much larger pieces. Yes, I could have gone outboard on my lathe, but I did not have anything to do it with, being a young homeowner. One of the things that is a real pet peeve to me, and quite dangerous to a lot of people, is their use of drywall screws in a faceplate. If you're going to use a faceplate, get screws that fill the holes. If you use a drywall screw, it doesn't fill the hole. If you get a catch, it's a possibility that you shift the workpiece on your faceplate because of the slop in the holes. Also, they're very brittle and they have a tendency to break very easy. I really don't want my holes to be showing, and at the finish there's going to be a cleat 3 inches wide and roughly 10 inches long that's going to hold my spindle to my tabletop. What I did is I found my joint line, which this piece, by the way, is 2 pieces glued together. Now I laid everything square so that when this does happen, I'll be able to cover those holes with my 3-inch piece. Naturally, I could go a little bigger or something, but I mean, it's one of those things you just want to make sure that everything is being done that you can to make a quality piece. The screws that I'm using are Robertson or square drive. I think they make a very good screw. They're sheet metal screws. They will self-drill themselves most of the time. Seeing how I've got a little money invested in that wood, I'm not taking the chance. I pre-drilled them slightly, just so I didn't take a chance of damaging anything on the tabletop. Now, I've kind of got a head start. When the piece was glued together, it was run through a sander, which should help me immensely on the sanding aspect of it. I have the top mounted on the faceplate to the lathe. Turn your speed down. That's one of the things that you put something large on, you may have had something small in there. Better safe than sorry. I've got my 3/8 spindle gouge, and I'm just going to clean up the diameter. Don't want to be in too big of a hurry right here. Actually, you've got a pretty large diameter and the surface speed is moving pretty fast. Let your tool do the cutting, don't force it. I didn't want to take a chance of chipping that corner off. That's why I came in with a pulling cut. As you can tell, it's not round yet. Okay, it's got a ways to go yet. I've still got some of the saw marks. I want to take my time and make sure it's a good clean cut, because anything I have to take out will do nothing more than reduce the diameter. So if I start getting it chewed up, that means my diameter is going to diminish even more. Okay, now the bottom is going to have a radius on it. So I'm going to put that on right at this time. And I want a little bit of a angled on the top. Just trying to give it a little bit of character of its own. I don't profess to be a furniture builder by no means, but I just want to make it look like something that I would like. Cut nice and clean. Do the bottom a little bit more. I want it to look like it has a step in it on an angle. I think we're just about there. Let me break that sharp edge. One more, I'm going to take a light shear cut. I'm starting out with 240. My cuts were pretty good. I didn't really have anything torn up, so I think I would be in good shape there. 320, 400, and 600. Okay, I'm going to have to back up. I can see a little of my marks in here yet, where it didn't get through the fiddle back. So I'm going back to my 240. Okay, that should finish our top. Now, I did not sand my top surface for one reason. I didn't want to get a lot of concentric rings in there. Seeing how it's been run through a belt sander, I'll just leave it as being, hand finish it at the end. I made myself a story stick. What this will do will give me my diameters and my lengths at certain spots. Now I went ahead and drew out my shape. And the reason I did that, a lot of times folks will do this, set a diameter and not have it in their mind properly what's really happening, and it makes for a fox pause, or in other words, you make a mistake. Okay, by having this in front of you, you can basically see where everything is going to transform. It makes it quite easy. This also works great if you're doing a number of things. If you were making a four-legged table instead of a single-legged one, you could use this to go to every one of your legs, and they would stand a much better chance of coming out uniform. The first thing I'm going to do is just reduce this to a diameter. I'm going to be using my spindle roughing gouge. As of late, there's been a lot of talk on people trying to change the name of this to a spindle roughing gouge, as some people think that they need this to rough a bowl out, which becomes exceedingly dangerous. It is not meant for anything other than spindles. So don't use it as a bowl roughing gouge. It is a spindle roughing gouge, and always use it in that aspect. Same with the roughing gouges, any of the other gouges. Start them high, bring it back till it starts to cut. That's our cutting angle. Get in the habit of shutting your machine off when you're moving your tool. It makes a horrible noise when you run it into your chuck. Besides that, it's not very safe. You always want to start at the tailstock and work towards the headstock. As you diminish the size of your piece, vibration becomes a problem. So if you're done with your piece here, as the closer you get to your headstock, you still have the strength. Also, if you had a real thin spindle and you worked this end and came to this a larger end at the tailstock end, you would have a tendency to possibly even break the thin end up at that is being driven by your headstock. So in other words, start at the tailstock, go forward. Yeah, I'm just going to mark out part of this. I'm not going to go the whole thing right now. Now this isn't rocket science, don't need to have it down exactly, but the closer you do things, the more it's going to look like it has been meant to be done rather than haphazardly. On my drawing, I have put my diameters. So I'm just going to take and set my calipers for these various diameters. The piece I have in the lathe is 2 inches for a diameter, so I'm using basically all of it. That's why I didn't take it real clean when I cleaned it up. I'm going to take my parting tool and just go in and make that cut. Okay, that's established that. Now this one's going to be the tenon, so I can go in a little more just to keep myself in line here, so I know what I'm doing. This one's going to be a 2-inch cut. As is this one. Now, if you were doing a lot of this work, when you go to your flea markets, buy up a bunch of calipers and preset them, and you won't have to go back and forth setting them. Now, this particular one is 1 1/8 inches. Now, I'm leaving them just a tad heavy, not a whole lot. Probably at the most a 32nd. And my bead is going to be, where my bead goes in here will be 1 3/4 inches. Now all I need to do is start clearing out. One thing I did forget to do is establish my tenon diameter. Which will be 1 inch. Now I can go in and start making my form. I'm going to leave that be so that I can come back to it and establish the diameter properly. I'm going to go to a little bigger tool. It's a bigger spindle gouge. Moves wood a little more wood here for me. Just try and take my time. This is supposed to be fun. We're not supposed to be seeing how fast we can do something. I'll take quality over quantity anytime. Okay, I'm going to go back to my 3/8 spindle gouge and turn my center bead. I'm going to take my skew and start making my cove here a little nicer. When you get down here, you just have to blend the two together. Sometimes I feel as though I can do better with my gouge than I can with a skew, especially when I get down in places that seem to trap me. Doesn't look too bad. Okay, I'm going in and establish my 1-inch diameter up here now. We use a paring cut with my skew just to get rid of some of this material. Now I am not scraping when I'm doing that. I'm actually using a paring cut. In other words, I'm peeling it off like you would veneer. Okay, I'm within 10 thousandths. Okay, we're right there. Now there is one other factor that we have to really pay attention to, and this is where it's going to set on our top is going to set and match on this surface. So we do want a nice clean surface there and make sure it's square. I think that'll glue up quite fine. It's got just a touch of concave to it so that it'll match all around the outside nicely. I've moved my tool rest down, and now I'm just going to take and finish laying out my story stick here. One thing that I failed to mention, when you do make a story stick and you're laying it out, this looks like it's quite parallel, but not necessarily so. I picked one surface, in other words, the one that's going up against my piece, and everything was laid out square to that surface. If you start reversing and coming off of this surface, sometimes everything starts to change angles and stuff. So anytime you lay something out, pick a common surface and use that. Just getting rid of some more of my material now. Once you have your dimensions, it's just a matter of removing the stock in between them. Just kind of looking to make sure that both of my pieces look relatively the same. Take my skew and start cleaning them up a little bit. Now this one is different from the others, so it's going to have to just be a one-off. The others, I'm meaning the other two down here. This one is considerably shorter. All I want to do is just make it a nice flowing OG. I don't care for it down here. It needs a little refining. Better. Now, one spot I do not like is in here, which I have to change a little bit. I'm going to deepen this. And I can cut my tenon. Use my skew for a paring cut. The reason that's happening is I'm overloading the tool. I don't have one side that I can have hanging out in the open. I finished turning my tenon, and now I'm checking to make sure that that is a flat surface where it's going to seat down on the base. If there's anything that you don't like, anything that doesn't look quite right to you, now is the time to take care of it. In other words, all we're doing is refining anything that we really don't care for. And I think at this time right now, I'm going to sand it. Well, it's sanded out. Looks pretty decent. I think I'm ready to pull it out of the lathe. Now, seeing how we've got our top done and our spindle, I'm going to have to start going on the base, and with that I'm going to have to make a mortise and tenon. I'm just going to do the mortise right now. I'm not going to show you the layout because the camera is having a difficult time seeing it in this position. When I'm done, we'll go back and I'll show you the exact layout. Now, the one thing that I am doing, this is my qualified surface, and we're up against that surface to put our mortise in straight. I now have our mortise in here. Now, one thing that I did do, this is our qualified surface. In other words, everything was laid off this surface. I also made that mortise off of that surface. Now, this is the back. It's going to be our baseline here. This will be the top. This is the front, and it's going to form a T. This will be our tenon that will go in our mortise over here. Our leg is going to be right in this area. When I'm done, I will have to drill a hole to run our tenon from our spindle into it. And probably I may even want to put a pin in that mortise just to make it look a little neater. Using a 1/2-inch 6-tooth blade, and I'm going to cut it to the best of my ability. And away we go. Now, making this tenon, I'm going to have to really take my time and do it the best I can. So what I'm planning to do is leave my line so that I have material to work that tenon into the mortise. Okay, I've fit my tenon to the mortise. Now we have our little T-stand, which will take our pedestal, and I am going to have to make a board that the top is going to attach to. At this point, I'm going to sand it all out and put some finish on it and probably put it together. And I'll show you what it looks like when I'm finished. I have my table complete. What I did is I took it and sanded anything that needed to be sanded, assembled it, glued it. Prior to gluing, I did take and use some Minwax stain on it. I did that prior because I figured it would be easier to do it. Glued it together and I sprayed it with Deft, which is a brushing type lacquer. I used a satin finish. I don't like things that are real high gloss finish. One of the things that I don't like about anything that is dyed or stained is when you turn something, such as you have flat grain here, and when you get down into this part, it is end grain, so it makes it darker. Now I'm sure you could use a surface stain, but I think that kind of defeats its purpose. So I just did the best I could. I did have to take and lay out my hole and drill it for the column. I just used Tight Bond 2 to glue it together. And then one of the things that I think was kind of neat, I did take and put a cleat. Now my two pieces are joined across here, so my cleat runs 90 degrees to them. I did put a screw on each end, and I plugged them so they weren't obvious, and I did sign it. Makes a nice little project. Jacob, I know it's been a long time coming, but I hope you like your table.